Hi, this is Bill Hitchcock, and I'm here to work on Chapter 4, the datasets and tables. I've got an example with the dairy sheet, so just let me set a couple of things up here quick. I want to enter in my name, if I can type. There we go. Today's date is the 30th, so 5/30/2018. And we're going to update the worksheet here. I'm working on E04 B2 dairy, and that means I need to delete this row, so I'm going to right click on the row number, hit delete, and we'll estimate it's going to take us 15 minutes to put this one in. We can update that a little bit later. Alright, so let's make sure that we save that file, and let's group our sheets together. So I'm going to right click on documentation, select all the sheets, check my page layout, go to print titles. For the header and footer, I'm going to go to custom header, and I will put my name here. And just kind of glance over and check everything else, see how that's looking. The custom footer, I've got the file, I've got the page numbers in there, and I've got the sheet tab, so that looks good. I want to choose print preview, see how this is looking to me so far. Documentation sheet looks just fine. And here is my data sheet. I've got one page of data, looks like a second page of data, and a third page of data, but the only problem is the fields don't appear at the top, so we'll need to fix that up in just a moment. So let's ungroup our sheets by right clicking and choose ungroup sheets, and we'll go to the dairy sheet and do some of our common things that we typically do. So I'm going to hit Control and Home on my keyboard. That takes me up to cell A1, and it looks like it's got the Schaefer Dairy Farm merged and centered across two rows here. I probably really don't need the two rows, so I'm going to unmerge that. So go to Home, click on Unmerge Cells, and I just want to merge the dairy farm across these top, I should just say in row number 1, I want to put it there. So I'm going to choose Merge and Center on that. And then it looks like my font size is a little bit large for that, so let's just double click and adjust the row height there. That looks a little bit better. I probably really don't need the second row, so let's delete that one. Clean that up. I've got the date. It looks like we've got July 1st of 2018 in here for right now. We've got the shelf life. I've got 30 days in there of shelf life, so maybe let's just put in there what that's supposed to be. And I'm going to format that cell with a comma format. Then down here I've got my field names, so I'm going to highlight those fields, boldface them, center, and wrap text. My department's a little bit too narrow, so let's widen that out a bit. That looks better. And you know me, I always like to keep track of the original order of my records. So in this case, since I've already got this merged and centered, I can do one of two things. Well, I'll just do it this way. I think I'm going to insert a new column to the left of this, and we'll have our sequence entered in here, so I can use my format painter, so that way I don't have to redo the whole format for my field names. So there's sequence. Type in 1, 2, and 3. Highlight those 3 cells. Use a comma format on the Home tab. Get rid of the decimal places. And then just double click to extend this series all the way down to the bottom. And if I hit End and down, my End key, END, turns the end mode on, my down arrow key, and we see we've got 100 records entered in there. So let's hit Control and Home. Takes me back up to the top. I need to shove my title back over, so let's cut that. Control X to cut it. going to unmerge it, that's fine, hit OK. And then I'm going to hold Shift and merge this back across all of my columns. So that was a few more things that we added in. So let's save this. Drop down underneath my field names, click on View, Freeze Panes, and Freeze Panes. That way if I hit End and down arrow, I can see all the way down to the bottom and still see what these field names are up at the top. So I like that. I'm also going to check my page layout, go to Print Titles, choose Print Preview. So there's my first sheet. Looks like everything's fitting on one just wide. Here's my second page, but notice that the freeze panes doesn't affect up on my printout, so that's where I have to do the rows to repeat. So I'm going to back out of this, go into Print Titles, on the Sheet tab, choose Rows to Repeat, and I'm going to click on cell A1 and drag it down to A4 to select rows 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I've got, it gives you a absolute reference to row number 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now when I choose Print Preview, I've got my titles and fields there. The next sheet, they're still listed there, so that's what I want. And then here's the final sheet. So that looks a little bit cleaner, and it'll help anybody that's actually reading this report. Alright, so we back out of that, hit Control and Home, save our work, and things are looking pretty good so far. Alright, we've got the package date. I can probably narrow up that column. Let's see what's going on here. For some reason, let's try that again. Double click, there we go. We can narrow up those dates. Now you might want to consider doing a couple things. One thing that we can do with the dates is if you insert a new column here, I'm going to call this the weekday. Narrow this up a bit. There's a function that's called the weekday function. So we say it equals weekday, parenthesis, and then reference a date. And it formats that as 1/1/1900. That's a bad format. It's just a date format for the number 1. So I'm going to use a comma format, get rid of my decimal places. I want to copy that, paste it here, and I'm also going to take that cell and I'm going to use the fill handle and copy it all the way down for the rest of them. So what this is telling us is what day of the week those dates happen to be on. So I've got that saved. Another way of doing this to help identify what these dates are is I'm going to use a long date format. We find out that day 1 is actually Sunday in this case. I'm going to format this with a custom date format. So if I go to Format Cells by right-clicking Format Cells, I'm going to go into the Number tab, choose Custom, and up here where it's got the type, I'm going to delete out all of that stuff at the beginning and just have DDD, which is the day of the week. I want 3 M's here. Oops, I should have hit my delete instead of backspace. Delete it out, so I just use 3-letter M's, which will give me the month, and then I've got the day and the year. So let's hit OK with that. So I've got Sunday, July 1st, 2018. Let's use the Format Painter and format paint all of these dates. Went a little bit too far. That's fine down there. And Control Home. So we've got a bit more information looking at that, and we can see actually what day of the week some of those things are, and do some other calculations based on that. All right, what we're going to be doing now is we've got our shelf life. And the shelf life is 30 days. So I want to find out, has this expired or has it not expired? So let's go home, control home. And I want to calculate out how many days that's been. So let's insert another column here. We'll just say we want to take the date minus the package date. So in order to do that, I'm going to use a range name. So I want to highlight the word date and this date right here. Go to review. Go to formulas, go in the define names group, create from selection, left column. I'll do the same thing for the shelf life. So I've got a couple range names. So now if I click on the 30, I can see that that's now called shelf life. I click on my date, it's called date. So let's type in equals the date minus the package date, and we'll format that with a comma format. We can narrow this up a little bit and find out that we've got 28 days between those two dates. So it's getting close to reaching its shelf life. Just 2 more days remaining. So why don't we try a couple of things? We can add another column in here, and we'll say days remaining. Need to widen that one out a little bit. So my days remaining is going to equal the shelf life minus that package length. So we've got 2 days remaining. So for the status, we can decide how we want to handle this status. We could do just a yes or no status. We could say, hey, we're getting pretty close to being past that expiration date and so on. So let's first start out and we'll do a yes and no. So let's copy these dates. Oops, let's try that again. Highlight those 2 cells, double click on my fill handle. And you can see where some of those dates, they've got parentheses around them, meaning that they're negative numbers. So I'm going to right click on that, choose format cells, and I'm going to try a number format, and I'm going to choose this one that displays negative numbers in red with parentheses around them. So that way if somebody can't tell the difference between the red and the black, they can still see the parentheses. That'll help them a little bit. And here we've got the difference. Monday, May 7th, it's 55 days, sorry about that pop-up, 55 days past due. We're already past the remaining amount, so that one's going to be, nah, we better get rid of that one. So my status, we want to say either throw it away or keep it. So let's type in a formula. Equals if, parenthesis, if the days remaining is a positive number, then we can say keep. If it's not, we'll say pitch or throw it away. And we can copy this down. And let's do some conditional formatting. Set up a new rule on these. And we're going to format only cells that contain anything that's equal to the word pitch. And if that's true, actually I think I just have to type it in, the word pitch. If that's true, I'm going to use a fill color and let's just try it in red. Hit OK. And that way we can see all those items that we have to pitch. So let's give this a try and see how things are working. Let's save our efforts. Let's sort by the date. Oldest to newest. And you can see we've got some items that we need to get rid of. So it looks like these are expiring today, at least according to our this is Friday, June 1st. It's saying our days remaining is actually 0. That's because our date minus that is giving me 30 days. Yeah, that makes sense because of the number of days in the month and so on. So we've got pitch there. All the rest of these look like they're keepers. So that looks good. Let's add in some summary data down at the bottom. So one of the things I want to do is I want to count up my records. I'm going to type in equals count and count up all these cells. There's 100 records. Format that with my comma format. Let's see. Other things I'm trying to think what would make sense here. Totaling any of these numbers, probably that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but maybe the average would make sense. So for example, even on the package date, I could do an average function and average up those dates, and then I'll use my format painter to format paint those. I could get the minimum, I could have the maximum, so we can do equals min. This time I'm just going to click on the first cell, hold my shift key, click on the last cell. I can do equals max, parenthesis, click on package date, hold my shift, go down to the last one, so we can find out what our kind of latest day is. I'll take those formulas, copy them over here to the weekdays. I'm getting a bunch of pound signs because it's formatting them as dates, so I want to change that to the comma format, and these I'm going to get rid of the decimal places so we can kind of see what day on average we've got. For the department, I don't want to do anything there. Let's do this for the unit prices, and those will format with a $sign. We can do this with our package dates and the dates remaining. Do some calculations with that as well. Let's use the format that we had here for these numbers. So that way I've got that red showing up, so that one works all right. Looks pretty good. All right, a couple other things that I want to do is I want to find out how many items I have that are keep and how many are going to be pitch. So I'm going to put that off to the side over here. Let's see. I actually want to do a percentage as well. So I'm going to type in the word. Actually, what I'll do is I'll choose my status. I'm going to hit Shift N down, copy those. Never mind. That's too much work. Let's just do keep and pitch. So what we can do is we could say equals count if, in a parenthesis. I want to count everything that's in this status range. So shift, I should say click on status, hold my shift key, click on this bottom cell. I'm going to always want to use that range, so I'm going to hit my F4 key to lock in the rows. And then for the criteria, I want it to equal these words here, either keep or pitch. So we can copy that down. So here's my total. I want to sum this up. And I get 100. So that's good. Using the comma format, decreasing the decimals. This 100, I just want to check to make sure that yes, indeed, I'm adding up all those records, so those two numbers check. And then finally we can do a percentage, which in this case the percentage is fairly easy. It's 90% and 10%, but I'll take 90 divided by my 100, use my F4 key to lock in that. I've got 0.9, which if I format with a percent sign, there we've got that, and let's sum these up just to make sure that yes, they do add up to 100%. So that looks good. All right, other things that I might want to do is I want to find out what department some of these items are in and do some work with that. So I'm going to take department, hold my shift key, select all those, copy them. I'm going to put them down here, hit Control V to paste it, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of any duplicate that I might have. So if I go to Data, Remove Duplicates, my data has headers, it's the department header, hit OK. So I've got 7 unique values here. Let's just call this DEPT just to narrow up that column a bit. Widen this out. And let's take those departments and let's sort them. So we can choose Sort by Department. Let's count up the number of units that we have. So equals count if parenthesis, click on department, shift and down arrow key, cursor down one more to include that blank row in case I add any more records in. That's my range, so I want to lock in the rows, type in a comma. My criteria is the word butter. I've got 18 items that are butter, and copy that down. I'm going to format this with a comma format. Let's get the total equals sum and total this up. And how about if we just say number items and over here we can say it's the percent of total. So I'm just using my format painter to format these new headers. So I've got 18 divided by 100, which should give me 18%. I always want to use that cell, so that's why I'm putting in the $ in front of the 118. Format this with a percent sign. And let's total all that up as well. And we've got some fairly good information about what types of items that we have, and we could, I suppose, do some other things to find out what percent of the items that are butter are expired and so on. That would be more analysis that we want to play around with. So that's all looking good. All right, let's save this. Let's make a copy of this sheet. So I'm going to choose Move or Copy. I'm going to create a copy. And on this one I want to demonstrate kind of an older way of using subtotals. But it still works fairly well. Alright, so anytime that you're going to do subtotals, the key thing is, the first thing is you have to sort your data. Excuse me. So I'm going to go into the department column. I'm going to sort this, and actually I'm going to use a custom sort. I want to sort by the department, and then within the department I want to sort by something else because I know I've got multiple values of department. So let's sort by the date, the package date, and hit OK. So there's all my butter. There's the cheese, ice cream, and milk. Now what I'll do is click on Data, choose Subtotal, which is in the Outline group, and here's the second part. First thing is you have to sort by whatever field it is that you want to subtotal in. The second thing is when you go to data subtotals, you have to choose this at each change in. And in this case, it's my primary sort key by the department. Next, you can decide, do you want to use average, do you want to use sum, do you want to use count, and so on. Average in this case would probably make the most sense. And then we can average up anything that's kind of a numeric item. The sequence, that doesn't do much for me, neither does the item. But actually the weekday gives you a little bit of information. The unit price isn't all that bad. The date minus the package date and the days remaining, those are both things that we could do some average for. The status, actually by leaving in status, it'll probably give us a count, so I'm just going to leave that. Replace the current subtotals. That was the default when we popped this up. There are no subtotals, but it's fine just to leave it checked. Page break between groups, I would only do that if you've got a ton of pages. We only have 3 pages total, so I wouldn't break this out onto separate, if each of those records, like the butter for example, if you had like a butter manager, then maybe you'd want to give a separate sheet, but I would leave that unchecked. And then the summary below the data, you can leave that there. It's going to be a little bit messy because we've got some other summarization in there, but we'll clean that up. So let's hit OK. And it did something. It gives us this outline where I've got 1, 2, and 3. 1 is the grand totals. So if I click on that, all I'm going to see is this grand average here. 2 are the department averages. So you can see the status part of it, that came up as kind of just garbage. It's division by 0, so it doesn't tell us anything on that. So let's go back into subtotal. Let's take that off. Let's put a page break between these so you can see what that looks like, and hit OK. And it turns away. And if I go to page layout and print titles, you can see here I've got butter, there's cheese, ice cream, milk, and so on. So actually by doing the page breaks on this, not all that bad. The report's fairly usable, and it's kind of nice to have that broken apart. Let's just show the grand averages, and we've got that information there. So if you do that, I would probably delete this stuff down at the bottom, because sometimes you get some weird duplication. And since we have that on an original sheet that's got all the data, that would be fine. So I'm going to highlight those rows, right click on them, and choose delete just to clean that up a bit. Alright, so that's doing some subtotals. So finally, back to our main page. Let's do a pivot table here. So as long as you click someplace in your data, so I'm going to sort this back by the original order. So let's go to Home, Sort and Filter, smallest to largest, and then let's go to Insert, Pivot Table, hit OK. I'm going to drag and move this to the very end and rename this sheet my Pivot Summary. And let's add in some things. So I want to find out the departments. Click there, it dumps them into the rows, and it tells me here's my department. So it's a little bit easier than doing that whole series where I remove the duplicates. This is a pretty quick way to do that. We can add the status in here, and I'm going to drag the status up to my columns. So I've got keep and pitch. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the sequence onto my pivot table. And what the sequence is doing is it's summing that up. So I really don't want the sum. What I want to do is I want to get the count of that field. So I'm going to change this to the count function. And hit OK. And just by doing that, we've got a fairly nice report. It tells us how many items we have. There was 18 butter items, 22 cheese, and so on. We can find out how many of these things are the ones that we have to get rid of, how many of them we're going to be keeping, and certainly made our analysis a lot faster, a lot easier to do something like this. I suppose we could try doing some other things with charting and so on, but this bit of information is fairly good. The other thing that you can do with this is, if I'm kind of curious about those 3 items, those cheese items, so if I double click on the number 3, it automatically filters those items out of my data set, and here's the 3 that I need to get rid of. One of them's expiring today, and there's a couple other ones that are past the days remaining. So let's just rename this sheet and we'll call it pitch this cheese. Alright, last thing. Since I added in these last couple sheets, we should go back to my documentation page, select all the sheets, check the page layout, go to print titles, check print preview. We've got 13 pages here. Let's just scroll through some of these to see what they're looking like. There's my original data set. There's my subtotals, and I'm just getting the department average there because we had collapsed those subtotals. So if we expand those out, that'll work out okay. And let's take a quick look here. There's my filtered sheet. Here's the second one, so that one I'm going to want to change the page orientation on. And then finally, here's my pivot table, but now at least my pivot table has headers and footers on it, so that works out to be a little bit better. So let's right click, ungroup these sheets, pitch this cheese, change the orientation on this one to landscape, and it looks like that will be wide enough. Let's go to the subtotals, click on 3 to expand and see all the detail on it. That way that'll look better when we print all this out. So let's see, I guess that took me probably a little longer than my 15 minutes. Let's put in 25 minutes to complete this, see if we're close on that, save our work, and call it a day.